This is Chico Resch. You are listening to the Let's Go Devils podcast on the Primetime Radio Network.
Happy Devils Tuesday. This is the Woo Report. The Woo Report. Episode 220. I'm your host, Sam Woo. Coming to you live from the Primetime Radio Studios in the bunker, somewhere in beautiful New Jersey. Streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, wherever you consume this podcast, maybe in the car, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeart app, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music Prime. You got it. News today. Big news today. I think this is one of these days where it's not a blockbuster news, but it's a big part of the Devils right now, long term, for the next 5 years. Jonas Siegenthaler has re-signed with New Jersey. The steady defenseman, stay-at-home defenseman, a leader on the team. 5 years, $3.4 million AAV. I think this is a great signing. I think this is a disciplined signing. I love this signing. I think he's a very underrated D guy on the blue line. And I hope to see more out of Siegenthaler for years to come. You know, we talked about all the superstar defensemen out there when Dougie Hamilton signed with the New Jersey Devils. And we talked about defense. But a lot of times, a lot of these defensemen, they have a lot of offensive upside. But you also need the guys that just gets the job done in the trenches. One thing I like about Siegenthaler is he doesn't get caught out of position too often. He clears the crease. He, does the dirty work that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. And he seems like a pretty good teammate. Just remember years ago, and I'm not comparing apples and oranges, but there's always a role for a Ken Daneyko-like player. Someone you can rely on. Someone that's respected. And when the Devils traded for him, they gave the third-round conditional pick via Arizona Coyotes in that Taylor Hall trade. As I tweeted out on my Twitter account at PrimetimeSamWoo, I tweeted out that it's the gift that keeps on giving, that Taylor Hall trade, which traces back to the Adam Larson trade, which traces back to Johnny Mack getting his shot as Devils head coach, and the Devils were so bad, and they got lucky in the lottery where they got 4th overall, and that's how they picked Adam Larson. Interesting, right? So, with that said, Siegenthaler is locked up long-term. I think it's a great contract. I think it's well-deserved. And Fitzy's looking to sign long-term deals to guys that deserve it, that can grow within the Devils organization. And I think this is a nice pay raise, and I also think it's a nice way of rewarding the right players on your roster. Eugene Hewitt says, maybe he'll grow on me. Good evening, Sam. Good evening, Eugene. Joseph says, hey, on the YouTube Live. Oh, if you haven't visited, we have a community page on YouTube. You could go to our YouTube channel, Let's Go Devils. Type it in, Let's Go Devils Podcast. But our channel is called Let's Go Devils. And you could join our community page. We just started this today. Put out a poll out earlier today about JT Miller. We'll go over that in a sec on the percentages, who voted yes and no, if they wanted JT Miller on the team. And we just put out the poll. Do you like the Siegenthaler signing? Yes or no? And also, I want to get your questions and comments on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and Twitter. Also, he had one of the biggest impact on the defense last season, Michael Viola says. Andrew Gilbert says, aren't you sick of the losing? Yes, but I'm also sick of the negativity. When I see a good hockey player, I will compliment it. If I see a bad hockey player, I probably make fun of him and complain. But Siegenthaler is one of those guys that I think really goes under the radar and does a lot of good things. And I hope he continues that. And it would be interesting to see who the new associate head coach would be, the running the defense, and to see if Siegenthaler can actually improve his game on top of it. Would like to see more offense, but you know what? Let's not overextend him, and let's not, have him overwork the guy. The guy's steady on defense, and that's what the Devils need help in, defense and goaltending, right? So, Andrew, I'm sick of the negativity too. The only thing that changed that is winning. Look, winning solves everything. We've been over this on this podcast many, many times. But right now it's the offseason, folks. What do you want? Not the Devils to not re-sign Siegenthaler? No, I think this is a great deal. We don't have to worry about Siegenthaler's presence on this team. He's not going to walk. The only way he gets himself off this team is if he gets traded. But I don't think that's going to happen. You need guys like Siegenthaler. You can't fill up your whole roster with a dream team of defense and forwards and all that. There are role players that you need to fill. And Siegenthaler, you know what? He does get a little feisty. I've said it all along that, the Devils have been improving the last couple of years, but there were some years under the Ray Shero regime that, if somebody bumps into your goaltender, nobody did anything. Not even stick up for their goaltender. And it would just come time and time and time again. The one thing the Devils need to do, and they need to play better at and be more consistent, is, get down in the trenches and play a little gritty. Not talking about the mascot, but just get in the opponent's faces. Part of what hockey, we talk about all these analytics, all these numbers, all that, but nobody ever talks about the human element. Nobody ever talks about the psychology. Nobody ever talks about these things, the emotion of the game. It's a game of momentum. It's a game of emotion. And again, when you have somebody like Siegenthaler back there that's going to put out fires, I'm not saying he's the best D guy in the world, but for 3.4 AAV for the next 5 years, and the way he's improved since he put on that Devils uniform a year and a half ago, I think it's a good risk. I think it's a great risk. You're not going to lose too much, other than $3.4 million for the next 5 years each year in salary cap space. That fills 1 out of 6 spots in the starting, rotation of the 3 pairings on defense. So I think it's solid. I think it's a solid deal. And I think that now Fitzy can move on to bigger and better things. Miles Wood, how would you structure that contract? Jesper Bratt, what's taking so long? Is there dialogue going on? I sure hope there is. Is Bratt looking for a short-term deal, betting on himself, or is he going to take a long-term deal, such as, 5 years or more with the New Jersey Devils? Good question, right? Also, Tice Thompson, again, I don't know why, to each their own. He probably is doing something. Maybe he wants a one-way contract. to stay with the team. But Tyce Thompson, you know what? Watch out for him. But the real guy I want to watch out for is Fabian Zetterlund. I like the way the kid plays. I hope he makes the team right off the bat. I think that he could be on the third line. And Steve Charter says, bye-bye Wood. David Triumph says, Wood is good, but the most overrated guy by our fans. Ouch. Ouch. Maybe. Steve Charter thinks $7 million settlement till January 1st, where they work out a new deal with Bratt. You don't want it to get that far. What happens if Bratt starts off the season, the first 3 months, with 32 goals and 30 assists and on pace to have a 60, 120-point season? Yeah, that value just goes up, and then everybody wants Jesper Bratt. You want to get a deal done now. Ramona Rice, Ramona from Kentucky. That sounds pretty cool. Ramona from Kentucky says Tyce isn't that good to me. Ramona Rice, you don't like Tyce? Anyway, bad joke. Bad rhymes. Kyle says great contract. Now we need Bratt to sign 5+ years, $6.57 million, and Wood's contract should be short term just because of hip. He's got to still prove it. Excellent point, Kyle. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. I love the good points. Denny says Wood wipes out too much. You know what? I would agree with you for the most part, Denny, but you know what? The season before, he actually cut down on the craziness. You know, oftentimes Miles Wood is operating at 120 miles an hour or 120%. I think he got intelligent with his motor. I think he got intelligent with his play. I'm just basing on the previous season that he seemed like he was more in control of his destiny versus out of control, like a reckless freight train that couldn't be stopped. Whether you're going to take a good penalty or a bad penalty, he was just going to go on with endless amount of energy. It was good to see him a couple games, but he had to shut it down. I think he had to prove to himself he still got it, but he needed more work in the rehab and save himself for next season. And, of course, it being a contract year. Let's see what else here. He has had one big season, Steve Charter says. I think he's talking about Jesper Bratt. I also think that the Devils, again, the compensation they got out of that Taylor Hall deal with Arizona, we're going to be looking at that tree for many years to come. I believe Kevin Ball is one of them. How will he turn out? The big guy? It first came up in the NHL level, a little tentative, a little nervous, as to be expected from a young player. Had a good Utica season. And when he came up the second and third times with the New Jersey Devils, he didn't look that bad. He was all amped up. And then he just kind of, towards the end there, just took a little break. I won't say break, but just settled down a little bit. The Kevin Ball that's amped up and is paying attention and is hungry, maybe I should say a hungry Kevin Ball, he's a good D guy to have on that blue line, especially the size and reach he brings, disrupting the passing lanes. Watch out for Kevin Ball. See how he does. Because for a lot of these rookies or young players, it's, put up or shut up. They're incentivized to play. They're about to get their dream shot. Ball has the inside track for last spot on third pairing, says Steve Tardas. Well, John Marino is in the lineup now. And how do you pair these D guys? Unrestricted free agent next season. You've got Ryan Graves on a contract year. You know that he's going to go all out to impress, knowing that he's going to get a big fat check and a big fat payday if he does. Pairing him up with Dougie Hamilton. Hope to see that pairing. Damon Severson, as of now, coming back, also on a contract year with the Devils. Where would you put him in the lineup? Simon Nemec. Will he crack the lineup? Will he start at the AHL level with the Utica Comets? Good question. Great question. I think he will be the X factor, the variable of how the Devils do this upcoming season. Steve Tarder says Graves is not returning. You never know. This is a young team. They may be on the cusp of doing something great, but then again, we've been living the hype for many years and getting no results. I don't know. Yeah, if you haven't heard it, we started a community on YouTube. Go to our YouTube channel, Let's Go Devils. Type in Let's Go Devils podcast in the search. You'll find it. Go to our YouTube channel, and then click on the community tab, and you can answer our polls, and we're going to do all sorts of stuff with that. Sam, when do camps start? Usually it's about mid-September, Ramona Rice. You know, it's been confusing the last couple of years because of the pandemic, but it's usually about mid-September. You know, the players come in, they're all in their Bermuda shorts, flip-flops, and then they do all the media stuff with the Devils content team, and then all that stuff that they recorded just gets dripped out throughout the entire season. Such as if they ever, you know, they would just say, you know, it'd be like, "Hi, this is Dougie Hamilton. You're listening to Matt and Chico on the Devils Hockey Network." You know, they do all those like recordings, which is pretty cool. Also, in the news, my article on pucksandpitchforks.com, Joe Tolentino deserves better. Pleasant surprise, some of the comments that some of you Devils fans have made in some of the Facebook groups and on Twitter. Again, there's still always going to be negative comments, but there were a lot of positive comments about Joe Tolentino. A lot of people saying that he was definitely not treated well by the fan base on social media. Some don't like his work. Some do. Some kids did. But that's a matter of opinion. That's subjective. But I think we can all agree that he took a lot of crap. And sometimes I wonder how I would have handled it had I, you know, again, made it a top three and actually got the position, how I would have put myself in his shoes, how I would have handled it. Admit to you, I probably would have snapped mid-season and probably strangled somebody, figuratively speaking. Don't take that literally. Because I know I'm seeing some of the comments on YouTube Live and Facebook and Twitter lately. People take your words so seriously that they take it out of context. And we're seeing a lot of the comments. And, you know, a lot of people, I mean, even a couple people, you know, wanted to, quote unquote, stop supporting the podcast and all that. It's like, no, if you have a difference of opinion, you don't stop supporting a podcast. Okay. A lot of it, you know, this is a labor of love for all of us. I mean, honestly, I could be watching the Mets-Yankees game right now, you know, having my chicken quesadillas, having some nachos, having some wingies because Sammy loves wingies, and watching my baseball and all that kind of stuff. But instead, I'm here with you fine folks. And the other thing, too, and this should be very, very apparent out there because I'm being serious about it. This is all live. There's no edits. We don't BS you. We don't take stuff out and make a different impression. Okay, we're real people here. And the one thing we all have in common is we're all human. Okay? And that's the point I was trying to make in the pucksandpitchforks.com article was, Joe is a human being. He's not perfect. All right? Some would say, oh, well, that's what he signed up for. No, he didn't sign up for people that would go over the line with some of the comments. All right? We're all human here. Even on this podcast, we make mistakes with our words. Sometimes, our sarcasm may get misinterpreted by other people. Okay? It's okay. That's why we should have a discussion without being inflammatory. Instead, if you want to call us out, and I've seen it in the comments section, there's a lot of stuff that I don't agree with that people have said in the Facebook Live or on social media. We have a discussion about it. Be like, all right, you disagree, but why? And then that's the end of it. You don't see us attacking people or whatever. And again, at the same time, we're human too. So sometimes mistakes happen. As long as you admit to it. And we're all Devils fans in the end. We're all human. AJ Bravo says, let's go Yankees. Well, let me tell you something. Seeing Aaron Judge as a Mets fan hitting that home run in the first inning there, you know why I enjoyed it? It's because I know he's going to be a New York Met next year because the Yankees have no money. Trust me. Steve Cohen has more money than the Yankees, like 5 times more money than the Yankees. Aaron Judge will be a New York Met. And there's a recording of it. So hopefully I don't regret saying this on a Devils podcast. What's the next Devils headline to come out, Sam? Brett Wood, possible trade, and what? You know what? I think it's going to be all restricted free agents signed. I think right now, as Tom Fitzgerald is knocking out deals, it also sends a message to Jesper Bratt. Look, you've got the leverage, but you know what? That cap space is dwindling every time I make a deal. So if you are going to, sign, you better sign now before I start thinking of earmarking that money for somebody else. Not to be harsh about it, but that's kind of the reality. John Heaton says, Sam, there are going to be arrogant comments everywhere. It'll never end. The ones who don't post BS are always better than those who do. Well, you know what, John? Completely agree with you. And I know that. But as hard as it is with this podcast, I still need to be aware that those podcast comments are going on, even though they're negative. Because I always want to have a pulse of the fan base. So that's why I don't take a lot of these comments, some of the insults that you see that are sent back and forth. I honestly take it with a grain of salt because I know that a lot of these people are keyboard warriors that if they ever saw me on the street, they would probably hide. So, and on top of that, that if your life is so pitiful where it makes you feel better to make fun of me, all right, so be it, because I feel bad for you at that point. It's kind of sad, but you know what? That's how I feel, and I just put that out there. Let's see here. Let's go to Facebook Live. See, now we're going to start putting polls on Facebook. I don't know if you still can or not. I know on Twitter you can, but, I like polls. I like polls with the, yes, no, maybe, all the above, those kind of polls, something simple. Jeremy says, y'all got to get Locked On Devils on an episode. I've tried unsuccessfully. Maybe I'm just not going to the right channels. Now, I'm not blaming Trey Matthews. Okay. It's just, I've tried, but maybe it's just not getting through to him, in all fairness. So I'll keep trying. Actually, we did have Trey Matthews a long time ago. I won't say a long time, about a year and a half ago. It was State of the Fan address. So if you want to Google or go to YouTube Live, just Google Trey Matthews State of the Fan address on YouTube, and you probably get that episode because we did have him on. And we usually have on, let me tell you something, we usually have on guests on this podcast before they become famous. So, like Ryan Novozinski of NJ.com, he was starting to get known. And then as soon as he got on State of the Fan address with Nick Villano, boom. It was crazy. John Sumner, hi Sam, just saw Siegenthaler side, great deal. Hey, you know what? Thank you for joining the party on YouTube Live. Steve Tardis says, don't take anything personal here. We're all Devils fans. Constructive debate. That's all we want. You know, like, you know how boring it would be if you guys all agree with me? Seriously. It would be so boring, this podcast, that I'd probably fall asleep. Eugene Hewitt, Thompson, Ball, and maybe first round for Miller or Tarasenko. Well, I think it's going to take more than that, Eugene Hewitt. I think it's going to take more than that. Do you think you could get Tommy Fitzgerald on the podcast, Sam? Truth be told, when I used to produce shows for Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, Tom Fitzgerald used to come on to our show probably about 5 times a year when he was the assistant GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins. I have his phone number. I could probably reach out. I could probably reach out to the Devils and all that. But at the same time, for me as the producer, the executive producer of this fine channel, this fine platform, the Let's Go Devils Network is now we're rebranding it, that we have to hit a certain point before we ask for these important people to come on, because we want to gain the trust of the fans like you first. So when Tom Fitzgerald goes on to this programming, he doesn't get the shenanigans that's on social media where he gets, smacked down. When Tom Fitzgerald, when we get to that point, folks, and we're going to build it together, it's not just about us. We build it together, the Let's Go Devils Network. Once we get to that certain point where Tom Fitzgerald knows that he's got, and the Devils know that they've got good eyeballs on what he has to say, then we'll ask, and he'll come on to this fine programming. We've had Doc Emmerich. We've had Steve Cangelosi. We've had Ken Danico. All good friends of the podcast because they've been on more than once. They've been on at least twice. We've had Erica Wachter on once. We're hoping to get her again so we can officially call her a friend of the podcast. We've had, who else? Not to brag, Matt Lachlan many times. Chico Resch probably holds the record for the most appearances on this podcast. Grant Marshall, great friend of the podcast. Bruce Driver, excellent friend of the podcast. Okay, we talked to other players that haven't been on the podcast. Jim Dowd, Jimmy Dowd, good friend of the podcast. Cam Jansen, great friend of the podcast. All have been on the podcast more than once. Let's see here. We've had Michael Vukovic on once, courtesy of Vinny Parisi, making that connection. Yes, the same Vinny Parisi on Game Day Live and pucksandpitchforks.com. Eugene Hughes says, don't get me on with Fitzgerald, LOL. Well, guess what? At least you're self-aware. At least you're self-aware, and that's the first half of the battle. Brendan Warner says, makes sense. Thank you, Sam. Yeah, and I know it was a long-winded explanation, but I want this podcast to be really more about us, not them. About us, community, respect, which is why we talk in this tone, positive. Even when things get negative, we try to lift each other up versus, hit them when they're down. Maybe one day we'll get Joe Tolentino, maybe one day, and ask, maybe there's some behind the scenes stuff that we have no idea that went on while he was the PA announcer. And I have a lot of questions, about him. Suka Minnick, also known as Getty27 on the YouTube Live. 5-3 Mets, baby. Bottom of the 7th. You see, I give you watching the Mets game right now. But instead, I'm here with you fine folks. By the way, I will get the Let's Go Mets podcast started, maybe in a pilot form again, because Travis Jankowski, who's on the Mets, really wants to come on to the podcast. For all you Mets fans out there, I'll let you know. But yeah, and one of these days I'm going to get into my cow costume with a cowbell with a Jankowski jersey and cheer him on. Andrew Gilbert, hey, LFGM. Hey, that's one thing we agree about, Andrew. Thank you. That's great. All right, so right now we're hitting the 34th minute of this fine programming. Siegenthaler re-signs with the Devils. Hey, we talked about small talk in the beginning of the podcast. Well, we had kind of a long talk in the middle of the podcast. A little small talk. I told you folks about my box lacrosse experience years ago in high school because for whatever reason, Nate Milbank just wanted to know. And that's what the Woo Report is. This is why we have this, because, if Devils fans had programming every day, little bit by little bit, and not have to wait for a whole off season to get to the season, you're engaged with your New Jersey Devils and your fandom and all that kind of stuff. So want to thank all those tuning in. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it because it makes me happy. Because, yeah, I'd probably still do it if we had nobody listening in right now. But that's not the case. It's almost like this is kind of my daily routine. Tony P says we need to sign Soto. You know what, Tony P? Let me tell you something about. He's talking about the Mets, I'm assuming. I don't like Juan Soto. I think he's just too much of a big mouth. And I think it would ruin the Mets' chemistry. But we're not going to be talking about Mets anymore. Okay, we're going to talk about how Siegenthaler is now re-signed with the Devils, and more to come. More to come. Especially, you know what? Speaking of more to come, State of the Fan Address tomorrow, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, sharp. Nick Villano, pucksandpitchforks.com, editor-in-chief, and I'm sure we have a guest. Check out our social media pages once those guests are announced, because every post, once I find out who the guest is, it's going to be me on a camel every single Wednesday. Look out for that post, and it'll have who our guest is. It's a picture of me in Australia on a camel because it's hump day every Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, the State of the Fan Address, presented by pucksandpitchforks.com. Thank you for all those listening to me ramble. Thank you. I kind of want to send the Devils take 2 of my demo as PA announcer, just to do it for myself, just to say I did it. Because the one thing that people don't realize is that a lot of these PA announcers that submitted, and I'm not talking about the top 10, I'm talking about like the real professional ones, they have some heavily edited audio in it. And you know what? I have a sound engineering experience. On my demo, I didn't even do that. But I'm thinking about submitting one in and just sending it to the Devils and be like, see if I get a call back. What's the worst thing they can do? Say nothing? Big whoop. Anyway, life is too short, folks. If you're going to take any lesson out of this podcast and what you learned today, life is too short, make it count. So on that note, thank you very much. This is the Woo Report. Till next time, let's go Devils.